Hey, welcome to House of History. Today I'm going to tell you about Charles Vance Millar, who definitely is one of the most colorful characters in Canadian history. But he only truly managed to rise to fame or perhaps infamy after his death. During Millar's lifetime, he already made a name for himself. He was a Canadian corporation lawyer and financier, and for that time he amassed a considerable fortune. He was part owner of the O'Keefe Brewery, acquired BC Express Company, gained the government mail delivery contracts in northern British Columbia, and he was an avid fan of horse racing, owning several horses himself. All in all, he was a rather successful man. Now, during his lifetime, Millar became known as quite the practical joker, and he was notorious for connecting his humorous jokes to the price of people's ethics. Some anecdotes state that, for example, he would often leave money on the sidewalk and enjoyed to see people rush and pick it up, and other small innocent pranks like that. But his final prank was undoubtedly his greatest. In order for it to be successful, he required quite a bit of patience, and he wouldn't even be there to enjoy the end results. Honestly, I believe Millar's elaborately planned prank easily make him one of the greatest pranksters in history. So, what did he do? Well, on the 7th of June 1921, at the age of 68, he wrote his will. After a poor relationship as a young man, he had never married and he didn't have any children. His parents had passed away long before him, and as such, he probably figured he could play a prank with the businesses and capital he would leave after he passes. In his will, Millar bequeathed his entire estate, but it would take 5 more years for anyone to find out to whom and on what conditions. Millar died on a heart attack on the 31st of October 1926 at the age of 73. The will was filed with Ontario's surrogate court, and the opening passage revealed the general tendency of the entire inheritance. This will is necessarily uncommon and capricious, because I have no dependents or near relations, and no duty rests upon me to leave any property at my death, and what I do leave is proof of my folly in gathering and retaining more than I required in my lifetime. Alright. So there were 4 bequests that were humorous in the short term, and one that I'll leave for last that basically rocked the entire province of Ontario and Canada as a whole for an entire decade. To begin with, Millar owned a vacation home on the island of Jamaica. As a lawyer, over the years he met several other lawyers that he knew detested each other. In his will, Millar bequeathed his Jamaica holiday home to all 3 lawyers who shared joint lifetime tenancy. After their deaths, the property would be sold and proceeds would be distributed among the poor of the city. But until that moment, these 3 lawyers now were joint owners of a holiday home. During his lifetime, Millar had already sold his home. As such, we'll never find out how this would have panned out. The next bequest was about his shares in the O'Keefe Brewery stock. He gave each practicing Protestant minister and every Orange Lodge member, an international Protestant fraternity, in Toronto a share, but only if they participated in its management and drew on its dividends. Now that shouldn't be a problem, right? Thing is, O'Keefe Brewery was a Catholic business, but that's not all. It was Protestant ministers that led the temperance movement, a movement that propagates the abstinence from alcohol. A practical problem within the company's structure prevented the legates from receiving their money initially, until the brewery was sold for $1.35 million in 1928. Every Protestant minister and Orange Lodger that accepted the bequest ended up receiving $56.38. As for his very valuable stocks of the Ontario Jockey Club, the horse racing track, Millar bequeathed these to 2 very vocal opponents of horse racing, William Rainey and Reverend Samuel Chown. These men were known as moral pillars of the community. A third man who hated the Ontario Jockey Club, Abe Orpin, received shares as well. Orpin owned several horse racing tracks in Canada, and due to his shady reputation was not allowed to become a member of this jockey club, his competitor. As such, he received a share of his most important rival. But there was a catch. All 3 men had to become shareholders within 3 years. Contrary to most reports, only Orpin accepted his share, once again proving Millar's notion that some men's morals have their price. Still, Rainey and Chown's shares were supposedly given to charity. And lastly, Millar left 1 stock of the Kenilworth Jockey Club to each practicing ministers of 3 towns close to Ontario. Obviously, accepting the stocks would go against a certain moral conviction for these ministers, and there was quite a public struggle on whether they would accept the stock or not. Thing is, the Kenilworth Jockey Club wasn't publicly traded, and after the embarrassing public struggle, it turned out the share was worth around half a cent. But although these clauses were funny in itself and caused a public uproar, it was clause 9 that really did the trick and dominated the news for a long time to come. Basically, Millar left the rest of his estate to the mother that would be able to give birth to the most children in the next 10 years following his death. As such, the Great Stork Derby began, and clause 9 read, "All the rest and residue of my property wheresoever situate I give, devise and bequeath unto my executors and trustees named below in trust to convert into money, as I deem advisable, and invest all the money until the expiration date of 10 years from my death to give it and its accumulations to the mother who has since my death given birth in Toronto to the greatest number of children as shown by the registrators under the Vital Statistics Act." In short, the woman in Toronto that would, in the 10 years after Millar's death, have the most babies would receive the remainder of Millar's estate. Right, so some other things were set in motion during these 10 years that Millar could not have known about. For one, the Great Depression from 1929 led to a massive unemployment wave in Canada. Jobs were very scarce and families often were fully unemployed. Around a quarter and a third of all working-age Canadians were out of work in 1933. As such, by 1929, some families started to seriously consider the Great Stork Derby as an only viable way to survive and have any income. Thing is, due to a fortunate sequence of events, the value of Millar's leftover estate increased significantly. He had made some long-term investments, for example, in the Detroit-Windsor Tunnel. He invested $2, but his share would be worth over $100,000 by the time the Stork Derby was over. His entire estate was valued at around $750,000 by the time the Derby was over. Considering the minimum wage was $12.50 for a 60-hour work week, even a fraction of Millar's estate could lift many families out of poverty. Throughout the year, several mothers that were competing became famous in Canada, and the Derby itself became famous around the world. Though, it has to be said, many women that were in the race didn't necessarily have their children because of it, and would probably have had large families if it wasn't for the Derby either. Anyway, after a decade of media spectacle, the Great Depression, and an ever-increasing estate, by 1936 the results were in. 4 women eventually tied first place with 9 babies each. All 4 received $125,000. In the aftermath of the Great Depression, this windfall was obviously life-changing. 2 other women were awarded $12,500 after a court battle. One of them had an uncertain claim because of 2 stillborn children, when Millar's will expressly stated live children. A very sad and grim twist to an otherwise funny and curious event. The other woman simply cheated on her husband and bore several illegitimate children. All in all, Charles Vance Millar ended up indirectly fathering 36 children and another 16 of the 2 women with disqualified claims. Not bad for someone that never had any children himself. According to a news article, the 4 families that won the fortune spent it in a very responsible and sensible manner. They bought a home and a car and provided a proper education for their children. As for Millar, 10 years after his death and during the worst economic disaster in history, he managed to improve the lives of 6 families with his final and incredibly sensational practical joke. Thank you for watching this video. I would also like to thank all my patrons for their generous support. If you enjoy House of History and want to support my work, consider checking me out on Patreon. For just $1 a month, you will already gain access to the exclusive Patreon series. Don't forget to subscribe. See you next time.